Art so often deals with the present, from societal issues to personal ones. But interestingly, when art utilizes emerging and experimental technologies, it can't help but make us think of the future. Perhaps this is because we're so acutely aware of how technology will change the future. Or perhaps it's because technology itself feels disconnected from our own human experience. AI More Than Human at the Barbican Centre is a show rooted in questioning our future.
The Barbican has a history of showing artists and scientists. We often marry the two together in our exhibitions. The two fuse together really nicely, create something that's rich and resonates with a wide audience.
When art projects ideas of the future, how will predictive technologies like AI help to shape it?
AI is now a part of the artist toolkit. Artists are reaching for anything that they can use to try to deal with the craziness and the complexity of the world. And artificial intelligence is really interesting because it both creates a mirror of the world and at the same time, it tries to understand the processes that we have as human beings. So we have this idea of building things that are both in our own image, but that also obtain their own autonomy.
We are technological beings. In some sense, technology has always enriched our capabilities to do things. So it's just logical that possibilities of AI are seeping into our culture.
With it only just beginning to make a mark on our present lives, continuing their discussion, Anna Holsgrove and Anna Ridler share their hopes and fears for what's to come with AI.
I want to talk a bit more generally about AI and art in the future.
I'm a little bit worried about it in the future because I think...
Why are you worried?
I worry a little bit AI might enable a loss of wonder because you don't have to imagine as much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can see that, but I also think city planners or architects and engineers using AI the next few years.
Also kind of like science. So you have scientists who are using AI and then making discoveries that because it's suggesting things that they never would have come up with themselves. And I think there is the positive, but then there's also kind of like maybe the negative about how this is going to affect the workplace and kind of like automation and things, but I don't know. It's still, it feels like it could go anywhere.
Art has always been about like first denying certain new movements, but eventually if something is relevant to the world, it will make its way into art. And of course it's already happening with AI art, but we are trying to make the machines do something that is relevant to us. So we cannot exclude ourselves from it. Everything they do is kind of in interaction. It's a feedback loop between us and the machine.
I suppose thinking further ahead and speculating on the future, if I was to be curating this exhibition in 50 years' time, I think it probably wouldn't be called artificial intelligence. I'm wondering at what point we'll drop the artificial. What do you think 50 years ahead?
I find it so difficult to speculate in the future. I mean, it's just increases in capabilities so quickly already, but at the same time it's still so brittle and so fragile, and still 50 years ago this was like science fiction. The ability to do all of the things that, you know, we can do now and all the things that are in the exhibition, just that was fiction. And so I think my brain is just too small to comprehend what it might be in like 50, 60 years' time.
The Art Happens Here is Rhizome's collection of 100 of NetArt's seminal works, spanning 3 different decades. Through a careful program of archiving and restoring the different work, the collection has become a repository of artist experiments across all ages of the internet so far.
This is the Art Happens Here, NetArt's Archival Poetics. It's an exhibition from a major project we've been undertaking called NetArt Anthology, which is as an entire initiative seeking to retell the history of internet art. You'll be able to see works that you haven't seen because of technical obsolescence for many years.
I think that this show does speak directly to the question of art's relationship to technology. Any artist working after a certain point in time has to have a relationship to technology, be it that they reject dealing with it directly in their work or that they are actively engaging in. So I think that a lot of the works in this show are very, very cognizant of their relationship to technology and are actively trying to work through that.
I always thought about your work that it feels like there's reference in it but it also feels like very speculative.
Well, this is another good way to talk about how the internet has influenced the work. You know, I'm someone who has had my own mental health struggles throughout life. And for me, the computer and technology has always been like my safe space. It's been my place where I feel, you know, free and comfortable and expansive. But likewise, as my career has, you know, been built around the computer, it's also sort of created this very insular relationship of me and a desk in a corner. And so along with these new technologies that I'm talking about, I've also encouraged myself to get up from the computer and start working with my body in physical space more. That journey from making work to be experienced by a single person on the other end of the screen to moving into a physical space, I think that's, you know, a big part of the story of where my artwork has been going.
In the years since I've been here, we've launched a software development program which focuses on building tools for web archiving and reperforming born digital artifacts of all kinds.
A great example of some of the problems of preservation that we've encountered, an example of an artist sort of thematizing those problems, is Olealina's Give Me Time, This Page Is No More, which is a slide projector that projects GeoCities pages that either announce the creation of a new page or basically the abandonment or death of a page. Ole is really interested in the sort of life cycles of content and objects on the internet and has, in her own practice, really dug into the question of preservation.
In many ways, this exhibition is retrospective, historical. It's looking at things that begin in 1985 and move into the future. But for us, this is like a really contemporary exhibition. This is the subject of conversation that's very active online right now about the type of life and culture that plays out on the web that then doesn't necessarily have the protection that other culture elsewhere has. But we're also engaging in this very contemporary conversation. It just looks like Windows 95 browsers.
Art can be a weapon for change. And for Hito Stell, using technology and social media can bolster the firepower. With her show directly challenging the inequality of the surrounding area, there is a sense that the important ideas behind the work can have more chance for positive social change when audiences connect to them through new media. But of course, through any type of art or culture, the medium shouldn't distract from the message, because then the idea could become lost.
Paul Klee, the legendary early 20th century artist, was a very big influence on me, and he wrote that art's role is to make the invisible visible. If you want to understand the forces which are effective in art in the 21st century, it's important to understand what's happening in science, what's happening in music, what's happening in literature, what's happening in architecture. And so what we really do is to explore all these intersections and work with artists very closely to connect them to these other disciplines.
Traditionally, we've treated the white cube as a fixed boundary and everything happens within it. But in the moment in which you have social media and you have this proliferation of all these kind of platforms and different ways of disseminating the work, whether it's a video, it's the experience itself, an app, etc., you get this real dispersal of information, and then everything becomes a material in the greater work.
The technology becomes another protagonist, just as the institution is also a protagonist. And all of these elements are brought together to create these conversations about what the possibilities of those are.
Whilst AI has actually been around for a really long time, there are other strands of technology coming into play now. So something that will cause all kinds of debates within society is the growing use of biotechnologies. You know, there are all kinds of different directions. I think the other thing that's going to be interesting is also the backlash against technology, that increasingly people don't want it to be a part of their life. And in many ways, an art gallery is a sacred space, and much of this could be seen to be profane.
Technologies and the digital projects that we've been engaging in is taking us beyond the gallery space and beyond these different spaces, and also engaging with the local communities.
I guess that we exist in this moment where everything is kind of networked. And so increasingly, institutions become more collaborative, more cooperative, and we now have entered into this space of kind of extreme plurality. And it seems very much that this is the direction of travel for institutions going into the future.
Even if exhibitions in the 21st century are more and more addressing all the senses, it's important that they are not overpowering the viewer. We very much believe in what Marcel Duchamp said. The viewer should be enabled, the viewer should do half of the work, and that's why I think it's very exciting that we find a way to do these new exhibitions, but in a way that gives the viewer space.
Society can agree that technology will change the future, but how is a completely different matter. The speed and intensity of tech's impact on our lives has meant that we aren't just asking the questions of how we live now. More than ever, we're questioning what life will be like 10, 20, even 50 years from now.